Girl in trouble hides between a stranger's legs, not knowing he was a millionaire, and disaster turns into love. Before we start the story, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Mila walked into the building, the delivery bag hanging from her arm. Just another gig to pay the bills. Just drop off the order and disappear. Simple and quick, or at least it should have been. As soon as she stepped inside, she came face to face with a man standing by the coffee machine. And before she could back away, he saw her. Mila. Hey, wait. Let's talk, shouted Gustavo, the ex-boyfriend she had been avoiding for months. She didn't wait. She spun on her heels and ran down the hallway, heart pounding. If he caught up to her, he'd start his usual speech. We were perfect together. Remember our playlist? I know you miss me. She needed to get out of there. That's when she spotted a long table with a man in a suit standing in front of it, looking at a tablet. Without thinking, she ran toward him, dropped to the floor, and crouched between his legs, squeezing the bag tightly against her. Please pretend you didn't see me, she whispered, hiding there, her forehead almost touching his pants. The man froze. What? Just 30 seconds, she pleaded, looking up between his knees. That guy saw me. He's always following me. He's an ex. Okay? I know this is weird, but please help me. He glanced around, clearly confused, but didn't move. He slowly lowered his tablet, trying to figure out if this was really happening. Hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mila held her breath. Excuse me, sir? Have you seen a girl run by? Red backpack? Gustavo asked as he appeared in the doorway. The man took a deep breath and calmly replied. She ran that way. Looked like she was in a hurry. Gustavo muttered a quick, thanks, and walked away without a second thought. Mila only exhaled when everything fell silent. Okay, she slowly pulled back. That was embarrassing, a little. The man was still standing there, looking at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. She got up, adjusted her shirt, and tried to salvage what was left of her dignity. I'm not crazy, okay? It was an emotional emergency, a survival tactic. Like in a movie. An experimental movie, maybe, he said, raising an eyebrow. But it worked. She sighed and held out her hand. Mila Rodriguez, delivery driver on the side, unemployed full-time. Brian Fisher, executive director, and apparently a human hiding spot by accident. Mila's eyes widened. Brian Fisher. His name was all over the financial news. One of the most private and powerful tech entrepreneurs. He avoided public appearances but ran one of the most influential companies in the city. Oh great, of course, because the universe never misses a chance to humiliate me. I just hid between the legs of a CEO. Brian let out a short laugh. I've had weirder meetings. I bet none of them involved a desperate woman using you as a human shield. That was a first. Mila cringed. I was just making a delivery, I swear. Picking up some extra cash with quick drop-offs. I didn't expect to run into my emotionally clingy ex, and definitely not into you. Are you okay? She blinked, surprised by the question. Yeah, I mean, the embarrassment is hitting hard, but other than that, I'm fine. He crossed his arms. Do you always handle crises this creatively? Only when plan A fails. So always. Brian studied her for a moment longer than necessary. You said you're looking for a job? Constantly. But no one hires me. I'm too experienced for entry-level and too inexperienced for real jobs. It's a rare talent. He handed her the tablet. I need a temporary assistant. Someone who thinks fast, handles chaos, and doesn't faint under pressure. Or under tables. Exactly. Mila stared at him, trying to figure out if he was joking. But Brian looked serious. Serious and slightly intrigued. Are you actually offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to prove you're more than just a delivery driver who hides well. If you're interested, come tomorrow. Office 1806. She took a deep breath, trying to decide if this was crazy or a new beginning. Okay, but if I run into another ex, do you promise you'll still hire me? I promise I'll give you a badge and access to the break room. That's already an upgrade. She laughed. Deal, Mr. Fisher. Brian. Just Brian. She walked away, heart racing. She had no idea what to expect the next day. But one thing was certain. No one would ever believe the story of how she got this job. The next day, Mila found herself staring at her reflection in the mirrored elevator of the corporate building, trying to decide whether her blouse looked more like a efficient employee or grabbed whatever was on the clothesline and came. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this," she muttered to herself, adjusting her hair. Yesterday, she hid between a man's legs. Today, she was going to work for him. The elevator stopped on the 18th floor. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted her with a formal smile and a clipboard in hand. "Good morning. Name? Mila Rodriguez. Mr. Fisher asked me to come." The woman nodded as if this was nothing out of the ordinary. "He's expecting you. You can go in." As she walked down the glass corridor, Mila took in the office around her. Modern, sleek, spotless. People moved quickly with purpose. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing, except her. The office door opened before she could knock. Brian Fisher was there with the same neutral expression as the day before. White shirt sleeves rolled up, blazer draped over the chair, tablet in hand. "Mila, good morning." "Hi, I'm here as promised and without running away this time." He motioned to the chair in front of his desk. "Good, let's talk." She sat down, trying to look natural. Brian, on the other hand, looked exactly how she imagined a CEO would. Direct, precise, impossible to read. This project, he began activating the holographic screen on his desk, is a new creative unit. A small, agile team focused on innovative solutions. But honestly, we're lacking energy and patience. "And that's where I come in?" "That's where you could come in," he confirmed. "I need someone to handle the practical side. Scheduling, meeting follow-ups, logistical support, but most importantly, someone who can stay calm under pressure." Mila raised her hand like she was in a classroom. "I hid between your legs yesterday. I think that proves I can be pretty creative under pressure." Brian smiled slightly, that almost laugh that lasted less than 2 seconds. "Exactly. Now, about your work experience." "Well, I started studying graphic design, but I put it on hold to take care of my mom. Since then, I've worked wherever I could. Deliveries, formatting, customer service, basic editing, catering. I was even a fake bride at a bridal shower once." Long story. He simply nodded as if everything she said made perfect sense. Flexible, adaptable, unconventional. "I prefer versatile, but unconventional works too," she replied, trying not to sound nervous. He pulled a thin folder from his drawer and slid it across the desk. "This is a temporary 3-month contract. If you like the job and if I like working with you, we can extend it. Do you accept?" Mila picked up the folder, read 1, 2 lines, then stopped. "Is this real? Unless you're asleep on the lobby floor again." "No, that was just once." Brian handed her a pen. She hesitated for a second, then signed. "Done. Now you have an assistant with quick reflexes and a slight tendency toward chaos. And I have an interesting experiment for the next 90 days. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you usually call your employees experiments?" "Only the ones who show up hiding under tables." "Shall we?" Mila followed him upstairs to a spacious office with huge windows overlooking the city. A corner sofa, a workstation, and a giant digital table filled the space. Brian introduced each area like he was showing off a spaceship. "This will be your station. And this team," he said, pointing to a group of 4 people in front of an interactive screen, "is the heart of the project. Each one has a specialty. Your job is make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes." Mila waved at them. She got a few curious looks, especially from a tall blonde woman in a burgundy blazer who had a "I'll judge you in 5 seconds" expression. "That's Helena. She handles planning and love silence," Brian whispered. "So try not to tell jokes around her." "I'm already nervous," Mila whispered back. "Good. That works better." The others seemed more welcoming. One guy wearing glasses and headphones just gave her a thumbs up. Another in a black t-shirt with a retro design handed her a strawberry candy and smiled. "I like him. He's a programmer. Doesn't talk much, but he's always handing out candy. It's his language." Throughout the morning, Mila learned how to use the company's internal system, sat to a remote meeting, and nearly spilled coffee on the printer. Brian watched her from time to time, but never interfered. When someone paged her over the intercom, she always replied just a second, which usually turned into 5 minutes. Around noon, he walked past her and said lunch. I thought lunch here was every man for himself. Maybe, but I'm heading to the executive kitchen for some coffee, and you look like you need food before you start chewing on your keyboard. She stood up immediately. See, you understand your assistants better than you think. The executive kitchen was on a private floor, modern, bright, and filled with plates that looked too fancy to be real. Brian grabbed a cup of coffee and handed her a bottle of juice. So, he asked, leaning against the counter, "Are you surviving?" "For now, yes. I just feel like I'm about to cause a small accident, like knocking over a server or setting a light bulb on fire. I hope not." That light bulb was expensive. She laughed and took a sip of her juice. "You know, I didn't think I'd be here today. Yesterday, I just wanted to drop off a package and avoid my ex. Now I have a badge and a desk with a view. Life has a funny way of happening when you're distracted. Like tripping over the CEO?" "Exactly." They held eye contact a second longer than necessary before Brian looked away, finishing his coffee. "We have a meeting at 2. Be ready." "I'm always almost ready." As he walked away, Mila smiled to herself. The truth was, she had no idea how she ended up here. But maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. The 2 o'clock meeting ended precisely at 3:26. Mila had no idea how, but she survived 30 minutes of technical terms, holographic spreadsheets, and Helena's sharp silence. Her looks alone could make someone feel like they were failing just by breathing. Brian, as always, was a fortress. Straight posture, firm voice, no visible reaction except for the occasional understood or go on. Mila, on the other hand, was frantically scribbling in a notebook, trying not to look lost while wondering what is a cross-metrics report and why did he ask me to review one. When the room emptied, Brian turned to her. "I need to go up to finance on the 22nd floor. Come with me." "Sure," she said, even though she had no idea why. She walked beside him down the hall, trying to match his pace without looking like she was jogging. They stopped in front of the elevator, and he pressed the button. The silence between them was comfortable but strange. It was still hard to believe they were working together, and that he met her while she was hiding under a desk. The elevator arrived. They stepped in. They were alone. "You're doing better than I expected," Brian said after a few seconds of silence. Was that a compliment or a badly disguised surprise? "A little of both." Mila smiled, leaning subtly against the glass wall. The elevator began to rise, the panels softly beeping as the floors passed. Until, somewhere between the 20th and 21st floors, everything stopped. Literally. The lights flickered. A faint alarm sounded. The panel froze. Mila blinked. Was this planned? A drill? Some corporate exercise to test our composure? "No, looks like a power outage," Brian said, already pulling his phone from his pocket. Okay, no panic." She took a deep breath. "We're just stuck in a glass elevator, 20 floors up with no signal, limited oxygen, and my stomach just reminded me I didn't have a proper lunch." "Mila?" "Yeah." "You're going into catastrophe mode. This happens when I get stuck in small spaces or when I see my ex, but honestly the elevator is more claustrophobic than Gustavo." Brian moved to the side and pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. "Looks like the system is down too. I'll call manually." He opened a small metal panel, pulled out a radio, and spoke into it. "This is Brian Fisher. I'm stuck in elevator C. Anyone there?" There was static for a moment before a voice answered. "Mr. Fisher? We're experiencing a partial system failure, but we're stabilizing things. It may take a few minutes to restore the elevators. Are you okay in there?" "We're fine, thanks." He put the radio back and turned to Mila. "No limited oxygen, we can breathe just fine." "Woo, so now I just have to deal with being stuck in the most transparent elevator in the city with my boss." She looked around. It was true, the elevator was all glass overlooking the city, or in this case the cloudy sky. "You know what's worse?" she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I get nervous in complete silence." "Eva noticed." "Then let me ask you something." "Go ahead." "Why did you hire me?" Brian seemed to consider his answer. Because you stayed calm under pressure. Because you have good instincts. Because you improvise. And because honestly I found you interesting. Interesting. In a good way. You reminded me that sometimes the unexpected is more useful than the planned. She bit her lower lip, curious. That's a pretty poetic answer coming from someone who wears a suit even to grab coffee. I don't wear a suit to get coffee. You did yesterday. Coincidence, she laughed. Are you always this stiff? Stiff? Seriously, quiet, reserved. Like you were trained not to show any emotion in public. Like a polite robot. Like a polite rote. He tilted his head, as if considering that. And do you always say everything you think? 95% of the time. The other 5 I keep to myself so I don't get fired. Go ahead now. She shrunk. You give off the vibe of someone who lives in a quiet apartment, has a schedule for watering plants, and has probably never cried watching a movie. But deep down, I think you just don't want people to see the chaos inside you, too. Let's play a little game for those who only read the comments. Type hot dog in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now, let's get back to the story. Silence for a moment. Brian stared at her, not looking away. Am I right? She asked a little quieter. Maybe more than you should be. The lights flickered back on. The panel lit up. The elevator shook slightly and started moving again. Oh, she said, relieved. End of the emergency drama. It was interesting. I like how quickly you think and how you talk even faster. She smiled. Intensive training, 3 siblings, a small house, and lots of TV with no remote control. The doors opened on the 22nd floor. They walked out side by side. Before they went any further, he stopped and said, most people treat me carefully. You don't. Why? Because I didn't know who you were when I hid between your legs. And because now that I do, it's too late to pretend to be formal. Brian stood still for a second, as if storing that information. Then he nodded and they kept walking. That afternoon, Mila didn't mention the elevator to anyone, or the conversation. But her mind kept replaying the moment over and over. He was more human than she thought. You're not gonna let me in, are you? Mila asked, standing at the door of the conference room, holding a tablet, her ID badge hanging around her neck like a cardboard necklace. It's going to be a long presentation. Your presence helps with tech support. Brian replied, not taking his eyes off the panel projecting the data screens. Tech support? It took me 2 days to figure out how to turn on the printer. Just stand there, smile, and pretend you know what's going on. That usually works. So that's how you run the company? He looked at her, expressionless. Exactly. Mila swallowed hard and stepped into the room. The conference room was huge, with an oval table that looked like a mini golf course, leather swivel chairs, imported bottled water, and a screen straight out of a sci-fi movie. She sat near Brian, trying to look more professional than still on probation. Across the table sat 3 representatives from a multinational design firm, all very well-dressed, very serious, with folders organized like they held government secrets. Brian started the meeting with his usual poise. Firm voice, precise pauses, technical explanations. Mila didn't understand half the terms, but she nodded occasionally as if absorbing everything. Everything was going smoothly until the presentation system froze. The screen froze on an image of a spreadsheet blinking in blue. Brian pressed the remote. Nothing. Pressed it again. The screen flickered, then went completely dark. One moment, he said, already adjusting the control panel on the table. Mila looked around. The mood shifted instantly. The multinational rep started whispering. Helena, on the other side of the room, frowned in a way that felt personal. Brian stayed calm, but she noticed the slight tension in his jaw. Want me to try? Mila said softly, leaning toward him. The system is stuck. Better not mess with it anymore. She didn't listen. She went to the panel and within seconds restarted the program. The screen came back, but for some reason, it didn't show the presentation. Instead, it displayed a folder named Prototyping V1 Do Not Show. Oh no, Brian muttered, standing up to close the folder. But before he could, Mila, trying to help, open the file. On the screen appeared a 3D sketch of an unfinished project, a prototype still in a confidential phase. For 2 seconds, no one breathed. This wasn't meant to be shown, Brian said, calm but firm. I just wanted to. I'm sorry, Mila blurted, swallowing her words. But to everyone's surprise, one of the representatives leaned forward with interest. This is fascinating. Are you working with adaptive interface technology for visual recognition? Brian hesitated. We're exploring the technology, but it's still in a very early stage. Can I see more details? The man asked, his eyes gleaming. Mila looked at Brian as if to say, do something. Brian took a deep breath and with a controlled gesture, activated the secure view of the prototype. The meeting, which had been on the verge of sinking, suddenly picked up momentum. The representatives started asking questions, secretly snapping pictures which were strictly forbidden, and discussing how to integrate it into their own projects. Helena looked like she was about to explode. Brian remained composed, and Mila just wanted to disappear into the floor. When the meeting finally ended, the representatives left looking satisfied. One of them even shook Mila's hand and said, "Great technical support, you must be new, but you made a difference." She smiled, blushing to her ears. Once the room was empty, Helena crossed her arms. That was highly reckless. If someone leaks those images, we lose our competitive edge. I know it was my fault, Mila admitted immediately. But Brian cut in. It happened. And in the end, it worked as a catalyst. We'll keep track of any leaked images and speed up the patent process. Helena looked from one to the other, then left without another word. Alone, Mila and Brian sat in silence for a moment. Are you going to fire me? She asked quietly. No. Transfer me to the cleaning staff? No. Make me have lunch with Helena? That would be too cruel. She smiled, relieved, but still visibly uneasy. I just wanted to help. I thought it was a simple glitch. I swear I didn't realize I was opening a secret folder with cutting-edge technology straight out of a James Bond movie. Brian leaned against the table, arms crossed. You thought fast. You acted under pressure. The outcome was better than expected. And completely by accident. Yes, but sometimes accidents lead to the most effective solutions. Is that a fancy way of saying I'm a useful ticking time bomb? It's an honest way of saying you surprise me. She looked down, fidgeting with her tablet as if it were to blame. I'm not very good at doing things the right way. But I try. Keep trying. That's already more than most. Before she could reply, his phone rang. He answered, spoke a few words in French, then hung up. I have to head to another meeting. Can you take care of the report? Sure, even though I still don't really know what a cross-res metrics report is. It's in the system, and if it crashes again, I'll hide the computer behind a plant and pretend it vanished. Brian laughed, a real, spontaneous laugh that made Mila pause for a second. You're learning fast, he said before walking out the door. Mila stood there, heart pounding. She still wasn't sure if she had made a mistake or done something brilliant. But for the first time since she started working there, she felt like she might actually be part of something. Later, in the cafeteria, Mila was eating while battling a mix of hunger and guilt. She was staring absent-mindedly at a decorative plant when she sensed someone sitting across from her. Hey Mila, right? Said an upbeat voice. She looked up. It was the strawberry candy guy. That's me, and you're the snack supplier. Pedro, interface analyst and official sugar provider for struggling interns, he said, handing her a pack of candy. She took it, laughing. So, everything okay between you and Mr. Fisher? He asked in a lower voice. I heard about the meeting. Let's just say it was intense, but apparently I'm not fired yet. That's a good sign. He's tough but fair. If he didn't like how you handled it, he would have removed you on the spot. Is he always like this? Brian, he doesn't like surprises, but when they happen, he observes the impact before reacting. I think you shook up his routine. Shaking up a CEO's routine sounds dangerous, Pedro shrugged, or transformative. She slowly chewed on the candy. The truth was, everything was changing. And even though she didn't quite understand why, she had the feeling that this accident between a mistake and a quick fix was about to turn into something bigger. Maybe, without realizing it, she had started to step into a role that was more than just an improvised assistant. Maybe she was starting to change the way Brian saw the world. And the scariest part? She was enjoying it. Dinner? Mila blinked 3 times, unsure if she had heard right. It was Friday, 5 p.m. Brian had just finished a video conference and had called her into the empty meeting room. Just the two of them. No warning, no context. And with that calm, surgical precision he always used, like he was offering a cup of tea. You mean an actual dinner? With food? She asked, skeptical. Yes, a real dinner. With food, silverware, a set table, and everything that comes with it. He replied in his usual impassive tone. She frowned. Okay, and what's the catch? There isn't one. It's dinner at my parents' house. They're in town. They think I work too much and want to meet some people from the team. I figured it'd be good to bring someone who's around. Mila raised an eyebrow. So you thought who barged into my life, crashed a system, almost exposed a confidential project, and then offered me sour candy? Oh right, Mila. I thought, who's brave enough to survive dinner with my mother? She laughed in disbelief. You're taking me because you think I can handle your family? And because you talk a lot when you're nervous? That usually works as a distraction. Oh, now it's getting romantic. It's not a romantic invitation. It's just dinner with formal people. I need balance, and you are the opposite of formal. Wow, your compliments are getting more poetic by the second. Are you coming or not? Mila crossed her arms, pretending to think it over. As long as there's no seafood, I'm allergic, and white wine makes me talk too much. Great, we'll leave at 7. Wear something without a cat print. At 7.10, Brian parked in front of an elegant house in a neighborhood where even the sidewalks looked expensive. Mila stepped out of the car in a simple navy blue dress, the most neutral thing she could find, and a borrowed coat from a neighbor's friend. Are you nervous? She asked, watching Brian adjust his blazer collar. No, you're sweating in the cold. It's the car heater. She smiled. He was nervous, and somehow that was kind of adorable. They were greeted by a tall woman with perfectly styled hair and eyes that analyzed with military precision. Brian, she said, giving her son a brief hug. And this is Mila, my assistant. Ah, assistant. Brian's mother examined Mila with a look that said, I'll figure you out in 2 minutes. Come in, dear. Brian's father, on the other hand, was warm and friendly. He offered red wine, asked if she preferred her steak rare or well done, and mentioned he was a big fan of carrot cake with chocolate frosting. Dinner began with everyone at the table. Besides his parents, there was Brian's sister, a cousin who was a musician, and an aunt who wouldn't stop talking about cryptocurrency investments. Mila, seated between Brian and the chatty aunt, tried to keep up with the conversation until she made the mistake of trying to be polite. So, you play piano? She asked the musician cousin. Actually, I play violin. Oh, that's great. I've always wanted to learn guitar. Violin. Oh right, that's what I meant. The room fell into 3 seconds of awkward silence. Brian cleared his throat. His mother rolled her eyes. The aunt kept talking about crypto. Mila took a deep breath. If she was going to be the clumsy one, she might as well own it. You know, she said with a smile, I actually tried taking singing lessons once, but the teacher let me go on the 3rd day because I sang happy birthday off-key. Brian's sister let out a quiet laugh. The cousin seemed to relax. Even the father smiled kindly. So, you don't sing, don't play, and don't understand crypto, the aunt remarked. But I'm great at opening the wrong folders in front of important clients. Mila replied with humor. Brian nearly dropped his fork in surprise, and his mother smiled. A small smile but real. At least she's honest, the woman said. Excessively, Brian muttered, taking a sip of wine. The rest of dinner went surprisingly well. Mila carefully explained how she met Brian, leaving out any embarrassing details, and deflected invasive questions with creative answers. By dessert, she was already chatting with Brian's father about homemade cakes and giving spice recommendations to the aunt, who was now considering investing in organic peppers. At the end of the night, back in the car, Mila let out a deep breath, like she had just completed a secret mission. Okay, I wasn't kicked out. Nobody poisoned me. Your mother called me peculiar, and I think that's the closest thing to a compliment I'm going to get. Brian, hands on the wheel, responded in his usual calm voice. You did better than I expected. Coming from you, that's practically a trophy. My dad liked you, so did my sister. And your mother, she's still processing. But if she didn't ask for your social security number to run a background check, that's a good sign. Mila laughed. For a second, I thought she was going to ask me to sing. Then I definitely would have been kicked out. Thanks for coming. She glanced at him. Brian looked relaxed, different from the man she saw every day at the office. Here in the car, under the streetlights, he seemed more human. Can I ask you something? She said. You ask even when I say no. Why did you bring me? I already told you. Balance. Distraction. Don't lie. You could have taken any assistant, any executive, anyone in a decent suit. You were the only one who made me laugh this week, and that doesn't happen often. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she smiled, looking out the window. Well, I'm glad I made an impression. Even if it was by stumbling over my words and mixing up a violin with a guitar. The car moved forward in a comfortable silence for a few minutes until they arrived in front of Mila's building. She unfastened her seatbelt, but hesitated before getting out. Good night, Brian. Good night, Mila. She stepped out, closed the door, and took 3 steps before hearing the car window roll down. Oh, Mila. She turned around. Thank you for being you. She smiled, put her hands in her pockets, and replied, I don't know how to be anything else. He waited until she entered the building before driving away. And for the first time in a long while, he went home with his mind full. Not with numbers, graphs, or goals, but with a girl who sang off key and somehow made everything feel better. The next morning, Mila arrived at the office with a croissant in hand and a question on the tip of her tongue. But Brian didn't show up. He spent the entire day out in external meetings. Helena seemed to know why, but didn't share any details. Pedro, as usual, just offered candy. Is everything okay? He asked when he noticed she was quieter than usual. Yeah, just thinking too much. About the dinner? How do you know? The building has eyes and reception has a big mouth. She laughed, even if she didn't feel like it. During the day, she reviewed reports, organized files, and responded to emails that weren't even hers. When the workday ended, she closed her laptop with a sigh. She was about to leave when she got a notification on her phone. Message from Brian Fisher. Thanks for last night. I hope the white wine didn't make you talk too much. Mila replied with a wide-eyed cat emoji. And a few seconds later, she received a 3-second voice message. Your laugh was the best part of the night. She listened to it 3 times. Then she left, smiling, without knowing how, when, or why, but feeling that something had definitely changed. Mila wasn't expecting to see Gustavo on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock, standing in the company lobby, let alone laughing and chatting with the receptionist as if he owned the place. Oh no, she muttered to herself, stopping in her tracks. She was balancing a tray with 2 coffees and a croissant, a small gesture she had decided to make for Brian, though she wasn't sure why the idea had seemed so right at that moment. Maybe because she was still thinking about the dinner, or because his voice message was still saved among her favorites. She took a deep breath and tried to walk straight past, eyes fixed on the elevator doors. But of course, Gustavo saw her. Mila, hey, look who decided to show up. She quickened her pace, but like an emotionally miscalibrated radar, he followed. Wait, I just want to talk for a second. A second is all I have before I throw this coffee in your face. Gustavo. You're stressed. Huh? Listen, I've been thinking a lot about that day. We ran into each other by chance. It was a sign from the universe. The universe is trying to teach me patience. That's the only explanation. And you really work here? I heard you've been making important connections, he said with a smug smile. She stopped, turned slowly. Gustavo, go back to your desk. Check your ego and forget about me. Please. He was about to reply, but he didn't get the chance. Is there a problem? Brian appeared suddenly behind Mila, arms crossed, expression neutral. Silence fell immediately. Gustavo instinctively took a step back. Brian didn't look threatening. He never did. But something about his stance, the restrained way he spoke, made people straighten up. No problem, Mila said, taking a deep breath. Just an old acquaintance. Old acquaintance. Brian repeated as if committing the term to memory. Gustavo forced a smile as if he still had a chance to come out on top.
I'm Gustavo.
I work in IT. We have a history. Brian simply looked at him. Some things should stay in the past. And with just one look, Gustavo understood it was time to step away. He muttered a quick good morning and left, pretending to hold on to his dignity. Mila turned to Brian, gripping the tray a little tighter than necessary. I was going to give you this before the parade of male egos started. He took one of the cups. Thank you. It's nothing. And sorry about that scene. No need to apologize. But just out of curiosity, what did he mean by important connections? He was trying to get a reaction out of me, like always. Ever since I broke up with him, any sign of my success feels like a threat to his ego. Brian nodded, bringing the cup to his lips. You talk like you're used to being underestimated. Because I am. Why? She hesitated. Because I was never anyone's first choice. Not in school. Not in jobs. Not in relationships. People only notice me after I trip over something and accidentally draw attention to myself. Brian looked at her more intently than usual. I saw you before the trip. She felt her face heat up. And what did you think? That you were an unpredictable variable. And now I'm sure of it. She laughed, relieved. Is that a good thing? I'm still figuring that out. The rest of the day went by smoothly, but Mila couldn't stop thinking about that morning. Gustavo had always irritated her, but seeing him there in a place she now considered safe unsettled her more than she expected. At the end of the day, she ran into Pedro near the exit. Hey, I heard there was some tension this morning. This building has too many ears.
Gustavo?
Yeah. And he even called me an important friend. Honestly, that's almost romantic coming from him. More like a threat if you think about it. Pedro laughed. And Brian? How did he react? As always, cold, calm, calculated. But was he more serious? A little. Pedro looked thoughtful. There's something there. What? Jealousy. Brian? No, he doesn't even have a temperature for that. You don't see it because you're in it. But from the outside, it's obvious. You're reaching. I'm just observing. And I'll warn you, if this happens, be ready. Because when cold people fall in love, it's like a pressure cooker. It looks controlled, but when it explodes, it's intense. Mila stayed silent for a few seconds. Pedro? Yeah. Never compare Brian to a pressure cooker again. 2 days later, Mila was at a cafe near the office, handling some tasks on her tablet when she felt someone approach. May I? It was Brian. She looked up, surprised. You? Leave the office? Sometimes. To breathe in real coffee and escape certain meetings. He sat across from her, ordered a black coffee and a slice of cake. They sat in silence for a few moments, the background noise of the cafe filling the space. Are you okay? He finally asked. Yeah. Just thinking.
Gustavo?
Among other things. Have you ever thought about taking a different path? Professionally, in life. She smiled. Every day. But I haven't found the right door yet. What if you're closer than you think? Mila frowned. Are you talking about the project? That too. But mostly about how you see the world. She leaned in slightly. Okay. Explain. You talk like you're about to offer me a secret job at the FBI. Brian smiled. I just think you underestimate your impact. You don't realize how much you change the space around you. I'm just trying not to trip over things. And yet, you stand out. Not because you stumble, but because you get up with grace. Mila felt something strange in her chest. A mix of embarrassment and pride. Are you always like this? Like what? Intense. And subtle at the same time. Only with people who throw me off balance. She stayed silent, trying to figure out if this was something. The waiter arrived with their order. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Mila spoke. I thought you were made of iron. But now I think you just built a castle with too many walls and let very few people in. And you? I came in through the window. Brian smiled, lowering his eyes. I think you did. That night, as she was organizing her papers, Mila received a notification. Message from Gustavo. You've changed. You're more confident. Is that his fault? She deleted it without replying. Seconds later, another message came in. Message from Brian Fisher. Forget what holds you back. You were born to go beyond. She stared at the screen for a long moment and replied, with you around, I think I can. The office was buzzing that late afternoon. The usually quiet, creative floor was filled with overlapping conversations, ringing phones, and hurried footsteps. A new international project was set to be presented the following week, and Brian had the entire team working at full speed. Mila did her best to keep up. She rushed from one end of the office to the other, taking notes, passing on information, checking schedules. Even so, she could tell Brian was different, quieter than usual, colder, more distant. In the last meeting, he barely looked at her. He just gave direct instructions, without the subtle remarks she had started expecting. No quick glances.
No fan smiles.
And she felt it. She didn't know what had changed, but something had. The next morning, when she got to her desk, she found a brown envelope waiting for her.
No sender.
No note, just her name written in black ink. She opened it. Inside was a printed copy of an old digital newspaper article. The headline stood out. Young graphic design talent turns down international scholarship to care for sick mother. And there it was. Her photo. Mila, 2 years younger, smiling with a diploma in her hand. The text explained that she had been accepted into an exchange program in Italy, but cancelled everything weeks before the flight.
No interviews. No fas.
The article also mentioned the name of the hospital where her mother had been admitted, and a quote from her. Family is my priority. Everything else can wait. Mila felt a tightness in her chest. She had hidden this from everyone. Not out of shame, but out of fear of looking weak, incomplete, of looking like someone who had given up. She folded the paper and put it in her bag. By late afternoon, Brian called her. Can you come to my office? He said, his voice drier than usual. She went. As soon as she entered, she could feel the tension in the air. He was standing, looking out the window, arms crossed. He didn't turn when she came in. Do you know what this is about? He asked. I guess so. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't think it was relevant. You say that like it was something small. You had a scholarship. You were going to one of the most competitive programs in Europe. And you just quit. I had my reasons. Yeah, I saw the article. You took care of your mom. But why hide it? She took a deep breath. Because every time I tell people, they look at me with pity. Like my story is some interrupted tragedy. I didn't want you to look at me like that. Brian finally turned to face her. I don't pity you. Then why are you judging me? Because I trusted you. I thought I was working with someone transparent. I am transparent. I just don't tell everyone everything right away. But with me, you could have told me from the beginning. Instead of pretending you just stumbled into this job. Like you didn't have any talent. Mila swallowed hard. I didn't pretend. I just didn't want to seem like I was using a sad story to justify anything. He walked closer to the table, his gaze harder than ever. Do you have any idea how much this company values someone with your background? How much your experience, even though interrupted, matters? And you think I wanted to hear that from day one? I just wanted a place where no one treated me like an unfulfilled promise. I just wanted to be seen for who I am now, not for who I was. Brian was silent for a while. Then he spoke, his voice softer. I don't like lies, Mila, or omissions. Then tell me, are you always 100% honest with everyone? Do you show all your sides? Or do you hide behind that blazer and that calm voice all the time? He looked away. This is different. No, it's not. You've built an armor, too. The difference is I chose not to use my story as a shield. She took a deep breath, took the badge off her neck, and put it on the table. If you want me to leave, fine. But know that it wasn't out of bad intentions. It was for survival. And she left the room before he could say anything. That night, Mila walked home with her headphones in, but no music. The city passed in silence around her. And inside, she was at war. Why did it hurt so much? Because she liked him. And not just as a boss. Because in some silent way, Brian had become the first person in a long time who made her feel enough. But now everything seemed lost. The next day, she went to work as usual. She arrived on time, turned on the computer, pretended to focus. Brian didn't show up in the morning. Helena led the creative team meeting with her usual coldness. Pedro tried to cheer her up with some new candy. Japanese grape, he said, smiling. Imported. Just for you. She thanked him, but couldn't manage a smile in return. At lunchtime, she decided to go out to get some air. She walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and watched pigeons fighting over breadcrumbs. She felt exactly like those pigeons. At war over crumbs of dignity. You did better than I expected, said a voice next to her. She turned her head slowly. Brian was there. Shirt sleeves rolled up.
No blazer. No mask.
You followed me? She asked, surprised. I came after answers. And did you find any? He sat next to her. I was too harsh. I got so used to controlling everything that when something goes off script, I freeze. I've been off script since day one. Yeah. And that's why you matter. Mila didn't say anything. I'm not here to push you away, Mila. I'm here because I realized you showed me a side of me I'd forgotten. And what side is that? The side that doesn't have to be perfect all the time. She swallowed hard. I thought you didn't want to trust me anymore. I was wrong. And I regret it. Brian opened his hand and revealed her badge, which she had left in his office. This is yours. She took it slowly. And now you come back and we start over. With everything on the table, no hiding. Mila looked at him. For the first time, his eyes were completely unguarded. What if I stumble again? I'll be there to catch you. She smiled softly. All right then. And together, they stayed there for a few more minutes in silence. Two different worlds, finally looking at each other for real. The week seemed promising. The international project had been approved, the investors were excited, and Brian was more present in the meetings. Still discreet, but clearly more approachable. Especially with Mila. After the conversation in the park, something shifted between them. It wasn't declared romance, nor promises. It was more like an internal truce, a silent pact of trust. Mila felt more comfortable to speak, laugh, take risks. Brian, in turn, seemed more flexible. Even commented, with a small smile, that her badge was now visible and not thrown at the bottom of her bag. On Thursday, she arrived early, brought coffee for both of them, as she had done a few times in the past weeks, and left a chocolate on Brian's desk with a note. Blood sugar alert. Watch out for too much seriousness. But he didn't show up. Time passed, the team gathered, deliveries were made, and no sign of Brian. No emails, no messages. Even Helena didn't know anything, or pretended not to. At 3 in the afternoon, Mila was reviewing the project slides when Pedro showed up at the station with a worried expression. Did you see Brian today? No, he didn't reply to my messages. Why? Pedro lowered his voice. The security on the floor said he arrived around 7, but he hasn't left his office since. He's locked in there. Mila furrowed her brow. Locked in? He said not to be disturbed. But that's not like him, right? Definitely not. Mila walked to the end of the hallway, stopped in front of the frosted glass door and took a deep breath. She knocked lightly. Nothing. Brian, it's me. Silence. She tried to open it. Locked. Are you okay in there? More silence. She was about to turn away when she heard a low, muffled sound. Somewhere between a sigh and a sob. Her heart raced. She pressed her ear to the door. She couldn't hear clearly, but it was obvious. Something was wrong. Brian, I'm coming in. Okay? She signaled to the security guard, who used the master key to unlock the door. The door opened with a soft click. The scene made time slow down. Brian was sitting on the floor, leaning against the side wall, elbows on his knees, head down. His blazer hung on the chair, tie on the floor. The lights were off, the windows covered. A tablet lay beside him, the screen still on, displaying a message. Mila entered slowly. Brian, he looked up. There were no tears, but his eyes were red. Tired. Exhausted. Give me a minute, he said, his voice hoarse, almost cracking. She knelt beside him without hesitation. What happened? He didn't answer immediately. He just took a deep breath, trying to regain control. You don't have to stay. Don't say that. If it were me here, you would have done the same. I'm not good with this, he confessed. Not with moments like this. Vulnerability. Failures. No one is, but we learn together. Brian looked at her, as if he were truly seeing Mila for the first time in a new way. I got some news a little while ago. My dad had a mild heart attack. He's stable, but they took him to the hospital. Mila sat on the floor next to him. Why didn't you go there? Because my dad hates hospitals, and I hate not knowing what to do. I spent my whole life trying to control everything. Predict. Protect. But with family, none of that works. And you think you have to be strong all the time? I always have been. Since I was young, my dad taught me that men don't cry. That leaders don't falter. That the world doesn't forgive weaknesses. She looked at him with tenderness. Brian, sometimes weakness is what makes us human. And it's in that weakness that we find real strength. He lowered his eyes. His hands trembled slightly. Do you think something's wrong with me? For being like this? I think for the first time you're being whole, and there's nothing wrong with that. Silence settled for a few seconds. Mila picked up the tablet and locked the screen. Then, she took the blazer off the back of the chair and draped it over his shoulders. Do you want me to take you to the hospital? I don't know if I can see him like this. My dad's always been invincible. Sometimes giants fall too, and we learn to hold their hands when it happens. Brian closed his eyes. Thank you for being here. Always. Even if it's just to sit on the floor and share the silence. An hour later he stood up. Walked to the sink, washed his face, fixed his hair. He looked at himself in the mirror and took a deep breath. Let's go. I want to see him. Even if he complains, I'll take you. You don't have to. I want to. At the hospital they found Brian's father awake, sitting in the chair next to the bed. A hint of irony in his smile. I thought you'd take longer. I came as soon as I could, Brian said, pulling up a chair. And you brought company, his father commented, glancing at Mila. Mila, my assistant. His father raised an eyebrow. Assistant who enters locked rooms? Assistant who knows when someone needs help? His father smiled. So she's smart. Mila just smiled back, quietly. Brian and his father talked for about half an hour. About exams, diet, exhaustion, about aging, and about letting others help once in a while. Before they left, his father held Brian's hand. You're going to be a good man, even if you cry sometimes. Brian didn't answer, but something in his look changed. On the way home, he broke the silence. You know, you always told me I hide everything, that I don't let anyone in, and you always escape with class. But today, I realized that being strong is also knowing who to let see your pain. Mila looked at him with affection, and knowing you don't have to face everything alone. With you, I don't have to, she smiled. Then, even if your CEO programming tells you to run away, let me stay. At least in the hard moments. He nodded without hesitation. Not just in the hard ones. Stay in the good ones, too. She rested her head on the car window, her heart light, even after such an intense day. The connection between them now was more than professional, more than a shy closeness. It was real, human, mutual. And maybe, for the first time, Brian was ready to allow himself to feel. It's just a formality, Brian said with his usual calm voice. Mila, sitting across from him, frowned. You want me to go with you to a gala event? Yes, as your assistant. As my date, she blinked. That doesn't sound like a formality. I need someone I can count on. And you've done well in previous situations. Plus, it's just one night. Elegant dress, dinner, some smiles. Social representation. Social representation? She repeated, narrowing her eyes. Is that corporate code for I don't want to go alone? It's a practical invitation. And functional. Functional, she murmured. Interesting. I'm a functional invitation. Mila. All right, I'll accept. But I want to make it clear. If there are seafood, I'll get my revenge. He smiled. Seafood removed from the menu. Promise. The event hall was absurdly luxurious. An entrance hall with marble columns, mirrored walls, crystal chandeliers, and waiters passing by with trays of drinks that seemed straight out of an advertisement campaign. Mila felt like an extra sneaking into a period film. She wore a simple black dress, borrowed from a cousin's friend. The same one who had lent her the coat for dinner at the Fisher's house. Her hair was pulled into a bun she made with 2 bobby pins and a bit of courage. Brian, beside her, wore a perfectly tailored suit, dark tie, and an impassive expression. But when she reached the meeting point, he looked at her for 2 seconds longer than usual. You look elegant. Is that your polite way of saying I don't look like a lost delivery person? That's my honest way of saying you look beautiful. She smiled, trying to hide the blush that came with the compliment. They entered the main hall. The background music was soft. Guests moved around in impeccable outfits, and the sound of glasses clinking created a constant background. Mila tried to keep her composure, but her eyes were darting everywhere. I've never been in a place so full of people who smile without showing their teeth. Silent networking, a corporate art. I prefer parties with karaoke and spoonfuls of brigadeiro. I know. She glanced at him sideways. You know me better than you seem to. I observe. They walked to the company's reserve table. They greeted investors, advisors, familiar faces. Brian did everything with precision and ease, and Mila gradually realized that he was respected not just for his intelligence, but for how he managed the environment without ever raising his voice. However, the glances toward them started to multiply. They're staring at us, she whispered. Ignore them. It's hard to ignore when I'm wearing heels for the first time in a year and I'm afraid of tripping on the carpet. You're doing fine. Do they think we're together? Brian looked at her for a second. If they think so, there's no harm in it. We're dancing as the environment requires. And the environment requires romantic tension. The environment requires convincing chemistry. She snorted, amused. You'd be terrible at hiding feelings if you were actually in love. And you'd be excellent at pretending you're not. She stopped walking. Was that a compliment? Just an observation. I'm starting to think you flirt like you're giving a report and you respond like you're presenting a pitch. She laughed. The atmosphere between them fluctuated between provocative and conspiratorial. Something was about to spill over, but neither of them dared to name it. Later, during dinner, one of the company partners approached the table with a warm smile. Brian, good to see you. And who's this? Mila, he said without hesitation. My date tonight. The man raised his eyebrows. Ah, of course. I've heard about her. Creative, quick. The girl with the prototype folder, right? Mila swallowed hard. I'm glad the nickname stuck. It made a great impression. Believe me, he said, smiling. In fact, I wonder if you two have ever considered working together on something more long-term. Brian kept smiling but looked away. We're focused on the present. The dance floor opened after dinner. A string quartet played instrumental versions of classics. Couples began to move gracefully under the soft lighting. Mila watched, distracted until she felt a presence beside her. Brian extended his hand. Will you dance with me? She laughed. That wasn't part of the functional date plan. I'm improvising. She hesitated for 2 seconds, then placed her hand in his. I don't know how to dance this fancy stuff. I'll lead. They went to the center of the room. She rested one hand on his shoulder and he gently wrapped his arm around her waist. Are you teaching me to dance or hypnotizing me? One step at a time. They began to move. She looked at their feet, then into his eyes. Do you do this with all your assistants? Only the ones who mess up my routine and steal my focus. Good to know. The world seemed to slow down. The music, the people, the sounds around them. Everything became background noise to what was happening between them. A heavy, comfortable silence. A space where words weren't necessary. When the music ended, they were still looking at each other. Faces close, breaths almost synchronized. A click was heard. And another. 2 professional photographers had captured the moment. Within minutes, the photo was circulating among the guests, being commented on with smiles, glances, and whispers. We're being watched, she said quietly. Again, is this going to be somewhere? Probably. And what will they say? That we dance well together? She laughed. Is that a metaphor? Maybe. They returned to the table. But now something was different. The touch of their hands had left silent marks. The subtle tension in their eyes. the unconscious gesture of fixing her hair, the silence between phrases. Everything carried a new meaning. On the way back, in the car, neither of them spoke for a few minutes. Then Brian said, "You're not just my assistant anymore." She turned her face. "And you're not just my boss anymore." They looked at each other for a moment, and smiled, without needing to say anything else. On Monday, Mila arrived early, as usual, balancing 2 coffees in her hands, trying to hide the smile that had been lingering since Saturday night. The gala event still echoed in her memory like a dream too elegant to be real. The dance, the glances, the silence between words. Everything carried something she couldn't name but knew was important. She felt like something was changing between her and Brian. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but inevitable. However, as she entered the office and saw Helena standing next to Brian's workstation with a stern expression, Mila's stomach tightened. "He's not here?" she asked, trying to sound natural. "He was called to a meeting with the board," Helena replied, not breaking her gaze. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing that concerns you. For now." Mila frowned. Something was wrong. Hours later, Brian showed up. He entered quietly, without greeting anyone. He locked himself in his office and didn't come out. No note, no message, not even a glance at Mila. She tried to ignore it. She dove into reports, answered emails, reviewed schedules. But the tension was palpable. Brian was cold. More than usual. The next day, it got worse. During the morning, Mila was called by Helena. "Mr. Fisher asked that you deliver the reports directly to me from now on." "I'm sorry?" Mila asked, confused. "And that you stop circulating in the planning and prototypes areas." "He said he's going to reallocate the tasks." "He said that? Himself?" Helena nodded slightly. Mila felt the ground drop out from under her. "Let's make a joke for those who only read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story." At 4 p.m., she couldn't take it anymore. She walked into Brian's office without knocking. He was sitting there, his eyes fixed on the monitor. The light from the screen reflected on his serious, tired face. "We need to talk." He didn't take his eyes off the monitor. "Not now, Mila." "Yes, now. Because I'm not going to stay here being pushed away without any explanation." He sighed, closed the laptop, and finally looked at her. "I'm reorganizing the team." "Reorganizing or pushing me away?" "Both. It's better this way." "Better for who?" "For you," he said firmly. The exposure at the event was bigger than expected. The photo spread. The press speculated. The board didn't like it. They thought what? That we're involved. That I mixed business with personal. That you're more than just an employee. And isn't that true? Brian looked away. "It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters. Because I've been by your side the whole time. On the office floor, at the hospital with your dad, on the dance floor. And now you just distance yourself? It's the only way to protect you." "I didn't ask for protection, Brian. I asked for respect." He closed his eyes as if trying to hold something back. "I'm the face of the company. Every decision I make affects dozens of people. I can't afford scandals. So I'm a scandal? You're a distraction. One I can't afford anymore." The words fell like a stone. Mila felt her body freeze. She wanted to respond. She wanted to scream. But all she could do was walk to the table, take the ID badge from her neck and put it firmly on the desk. "Fine. Now you don't have to worry anymore." She turned and walked out without looking back. Pedro found Mila in the elevator. Her eyes watery and her backpack hanging awkwardly. What happened? Nothing that didn't start with a dance. He was an idiot. Professional. That hurts more. She didn't answer. She just pressed the button for the ground floor hard. In the following days, Brian tried to focus. He read reports, held meetings, took calls. But the space Mila used to occupy, physically and emotionally, seemed to echo in every corner. Her chair was still there. Empty. The sound of her laughter in the hallway was missed. The smell of strong coffee. The way she'd mess up papers and organize his routine without asking for permission. Everything had disappeared. And he was empty. On the third night, without sleep, He stared at the ceiling of his apartment and murmured to himself, I made a mistake. Meanwhile, Mila spent her days trying to move on. She sent resumes, took freelance jobs, went back to making deliveries at odd hours. But everything felt tasteless. The city was the same, but she wasn't. And the absence of Brian hurt. Not because he was perfect, but because, despite all his defenses, he had let her see him for who he really was. And now it was like he had erased everything. Until one Friday afternoon, while delivering an envelope to a client at a publishing house, she entered the building and heard a familiar voice. Mila? She turned around. It was Helena. Are you making deliveries here? Work is work, Mila replied, trying to keep her composure. Brian is awful. And he messed up. And he knows it. Helena, with all due respect, I can't keep hurting because of him. Helena hesitated for a second, then said, he doesn't sleep. He doesn't eat properly. He doesn't talk to anyone. And he keeps your station chair turned exactly the way you left it. I just thought you should know. Mila just nodded and left. That night, Brian found the old card Mila had left with the chocolate. Glucose alert. Watch out for too much seriousness. He smiled and closed his eyes. He knew what he needed to do. And for the first time, he wasn't going to run away. 3 months later, the Fisher Group headquarters building was different. More airy. More lively. More alive. Maybe it was the new layout of the creative team. Maybe it was the international projects which had multiplied since the Silent Fog presentation was restructured. Or maybe it was because of her. Mila walked through the hallways with a tablet under her arm, headphones hanging from her neck, and a focused expression that contrasted with the colorful notes stuck to the side of her desk. She wasn't an assistant anymore. She was the director of strategic design. And for the first time, she felt like this title didn't come with any asterisks. She felt like she belonged. Present. Seen. Mila. Pedro called from the station next to hers, waving an envelope. The conference invite came. You're opening the talk with Brian. Oh great. Nothing like kicking off an international event with the light pressure of not tripping over the microphone. You never trip. You just change direction with style. She laughed and grabbed the envelope. Inside, there were still days when she doubted herself. But the fear was lighter now. Maybe it was because every time he looked at the glass room at the end of the hallway, he found himself there. That same night, Brian came home earlier than usual. A rare thing. He took off his blazer, loosened his tie, and went straight to the kitchen. He turned on the lights, pulled ingredients from the fridge, and played Mila's favorite playlist, the one she made called Pretending I Know What I'm Doing. He had a plan. Simple, direct, no frills. Just like her. A little while later, he heard the key turning in the door. I'm home, Mila announced, entering with a shopping bag. I got that chocolate you pretend you don't like but secretly eat when no one's looking. You bribe me so easily. I study your weak spots. It's my superpower. She put the bag on the counter and stopped when she saw the table set. What's going on here? Dinner. You cooked? With help from YouTube and my willpower, the rice might have a life of its own, so be careful. She smiled and kicked off her shoes. What's the occasion? None, or maybe all of them. He watched her fondly as she served herself. You know, a lot has changed in the past few months. Here, at the company, in me. I noticed you even left a plant in the office. Still alive. That's progress. The plant has a name. Oh no, Mila Tutuino. She laughed. That's weird. And sweet. He took a deep breath. I wanted to say you've changed me. She stopped, looking at him. Really? I had a strict routine, an unchangeable plan, calculated goals, and then you came along, messing up files, scrambling schedules, changing everything. Including me, Brian. And even though I resisted, made mistakes, and pushed you away, I understood. I understood that life with you is lighter, more honest, more whole. She moved closer, touching his hand. I changed too, you know? Before you, I just ran away. From responsibilities, from memories, from my own talent. And now I'm proud of who I am. And of this. She lifted their intertwined hands. Too. He smiled. So if you'll allow me. Brian stood up. He walked over to the bag he'd left on the side table. He pulled out a small box. Mila swallowed hard. Are you? Relax. He laughed. It's not a ring, not yet, just a question. He opened the box. Inside, there were 2 plane tickets and a small card that said Paris International Design Conference. 2 seats. 1 future. Will you share not just the stage, but life with me? Mila stayed silent for a few seconds, then laughed softly. Only if you promise never to say functional companion again. Promise. And never push me away out of fear. Never again. She took the box, laughed, and said, then yes. 1,000 times yes. They hugged right there in the kitchen. No music. No audience. But with all the emotions in the world. Months later, in Paris, the auditorium was full. Mila adjusted the microphone on her suit as Brian went over the final notes of their presentation. The event coordinator walked up to them. Are you ready? Mila looked at Brian. He held her hand. Always. They walked on stage side by side. Applauded. Heard. Respected. And loved. That night, under the lights of the Eiffel Tower, Brian took her for a walk. They stopped on a bridge overlooking the Seine. A street violinist played in the background. Mila? Yeah. He stopped walking, turned to her, and pulled a small box from his pocket. This time it was a ring. Okay, now it's serious. Her eyes widened. Here? In the middle of Paris? In the middle of our story, which started in disaster and turned into poetry. He knelt down. Mila Rodriguez. Will you be my wife and keep messing up my life? Only with a shared last name and an official playlist for dinner? She cried and laughed at the same time. That's so cheesy. I loved it. Is that a yes? Of course. Yes, my methodical CEO who turned romantic. He placed the ring on her finger and the people around them clapped. Mila pulled him by the collar and kissed him as if time had stopped. 5 months later, the wedding took place on a late afternoon at the beach. The sky was pink, the sea serene, and the flowers swayed in the light salty breeze. Pedro, with a microphone in hand and a light suit, announced, we're here to celebrate the improbable. A woman who hid under a table, a man who calculated everything, and a love that doesn't follow spreadsheets but is perfect just the same. Mila walked barefoot down the wooden aisle between the guests. The dress was light and flowing, and her eyes shone brighter than the sky. Brian waited for her at the altar, no tie, with a full smile on his face. Brian, do you promise not to freak out when I change the layout without warning? I promise, as long as it's for the sake of beauty. Mila, do you promise not to run from the next meeting just because there's coffee involved? Only if you make the coffee. Everyone laughed, and then in silence they both said yes. The kiss was long. The sea applauded with calm waves, and for a moment the world was perfect. The Verbo Printing Company was never the same after receiving a letter signed by Brian Fisher that said, you helped us find the way, and that will not be forgotten. Pedro, now promoted to Innovation Coordinator, organized monthly tournaments of guess the color of Mila's mood based on her accessories. Helena discreetly placed a yellow post-it in the corner of her desk. Not all mess is bad. Mila was mentioned at conferences, in articles, and most notably in the hallways of the company as the woman who came in secretly and stayed to change everything. Brian, he learned that loving is losing control, and he never wanted to regain it. At the last meeting of the year, he summed it all up with one sentence. The disaster turned into love, and love turned into the best decision of my life. They stayed together not because it was easy, but because it was real. And that was all they needed. What did you think of Brian and Mila's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to follow all our stories. And feel free to check out more touching stories by clicking here on the final screen.